We're good to go, Leslie.
Now starting the October 1st, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. Mr. King, will you take roll?
Commissioner Daly? Commissioner Friedrich?
Here.
Commissioner Honig?
Here.
Commissioner Horgan?
Here.
Commissioner Irwin?
You're muted.
Commissioner Irwin?
Here.
Commissioner Kostreva?
Okay.
Commissioner Leash?
Here.
Commissioner Ortman?
Here.
Commissioner Rice?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Daly? Commissioner Friedrich?
Aye.
Commissioner Honig?
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan?
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kostreva?
You're on
Mike.
mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Aye.
Commissioner Leash?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman?
Aye.
Commissioner Rice?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of the September 3rd, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion? Although, Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Friedrich?
Aye.
Commissioner Honig?
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan?
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kostreva?
Aye.
Commissioner Leash?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman?
Aye.
Commissioner Rice?
Aye. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of the September 3rd, 2020 work session minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of the September 3rd, 2020 work session.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Friedrich?
Aye.
Commissioner Honig?
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan?
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kostreva?
Aye.
Commissioner Leash?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman?
Aye.
Commissioner Rice?
Aye.
Motion passes. And next item on the agenda is zoning board of appeals report.
Madam Chair, I actually have a report this month. At our September meeting, Cohen Oil at 910 West Pickard came before us for a variance to add 2 electric vehicle charging stations on the property where 2 phone booths had previously been located. They met all the criteria for a variance and the motion was granted unanimously.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is communications. Mr. Kane?
Madam Chair, there are no communications this evening.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is public hearing Z2001. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first case this evening is a request to rezone the property located at 623 South Fancher Street from its current zoning designation of CZ Civic Zone to CD3 Suburban. The property was most recently used as a place of worship. The property owner is the Valley Church of Saginaw. The applicant in this case is the prospective buyer of the property, Adam and Kimberly Walleman, and the site area is just under 1/4 acre. Property in question is located on South Fancher Street, just north of Cherry Street. You'll note that the property is surrounded by other parcels that are zone CD3 Suburban, which is the proposed zoning category for this property. The use for the surrounding properties, north, south, east, and west is single family dwelling, and the future land use in this area is urban residential. On the screen, you'll see a picture of the site as viewed from South Fancher Street looking towards the east. This is the front of the existing building. As I mentioned, it was most recently used as a place of worship, which I believe you will note is reflected in the design of the property. You can see in this picture the single-family dwellings located immediately to the north and south of the location. Picture on the screen now shows the view of that structure looking from the backyard toward the west. So Fancher Street would be out in the foreground. Again, you'll note across the street, this area is predominantly single-family residential. And this use as a church is sort of an unusual use in its context relative to its surrounding uses, which are single-family in nearly every direction. Applicants for rezoning or change to the zoning map must respond to specific criteria that are outlined in the zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's role in a rezoning case is to provide a recommendation to the City Commission, which will hold its own public hearing before making a decision about enacting a change to the zoning map. As I mentioned, the existing zoning of the property is CZ Civic Zone, which is intended primarily for civic purposes. That zone does not allow for residential uses unless they are associated with a active religious use, place of worship use. The applicant in this case is looking to use the property as a single-family dwelling, which is a permitted use by right in the CD3 zoning district. Again, the uses in the CD3 zoning district are primarily residential in nature, and by right uses would include single-family residential. The district does allow for a variety of special uses as well, including two-family dwellings, bed and breakfast dwellings, short-term rentals, and childcare centers. These are all uses that every surrounding property in this immediate vicinity would also have an opportunity to implement. The property owner in this case, as I said, is looking for the by right use of single-family residential under that C3 zoning district. As I mentioned, there are specific criteria outlined in the zoning ordinance that the applicant must respond to as part of their application package. The applicant's responses were included in your packet tonight. Staff believes that the applicant has made a good case here, specifically because this parcel is located in an area that's predominantly zone CD3, that this rezoning, staff is recommending that this rezoning be approved tonight. And looking at the master plan, the current master plan adopted in 2014 shows the subject property with a future land use of urban residential, which corresponds with our CD3 zoning district. The proposed master plan that you'll be considering in public hearing tonight also shows the subject property in the residential category, which corresponds with that CD3 zoning district that's proposed at this location. So the proposed rezoning is consistent with both the current adopted and the future land use maps of the city. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Commission approve this rezoning request. We do have the applicants, Adam and Kimberly Walleman, on the call to answer any questions the Planning Commission might have. And I would welcome any questions from the Planning Commission in the meantime. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kane?
Mr. Kane, this is Commissioner Friedrich. Is there enough room on that property for a driveway? Because I noticed it does not have one like the other residential properties in the area.
Yeah, there's actually a curb cut and a driveway there. It's been significantly overgrown in the recent years with grass, but there is a gravel parking pad and gravel drive approach there with a curb cut to Fancher Street. And there's actually more than sufficient room to provide a one-car driveway apron. I know that the applicant has had contact with our Public Works Department to inquire about a driveway, putting in a paved driveway approach to the property, and that is able to be accommodated on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Kane? If the applicant would like to say something?
Is the applicant trying to say something?
I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, that just popped up. I'll just start from the beginning. Thank you for inviting us along here. My son's been at college there for a little over a year, and we plan on having him there for probably 5 or 6 years, hopefully get into a master's program. And my daughter will be coming right along after that in the next couple of years. It's very close to the college there, so it'll be like a home for us, for the family up there. So we look forward to turning it into single family residential residence.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Are you going to seek a personal residence exemption on that from school property taxes? Do you know?
I cannot because we currently live down in Chesterfield, Michigan. So at this point, no, it would be non-homestead.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Going to have to do a lot of remodeling to it to get it to residential status?
Yeah, it's basically a giant shell that's in really good shape. So we have experience working on homes and building our own homes, so we don't have a problem with doing that work.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Wellman. Now I'll open up discussion. Oh, now I have to have the public hearing. If anyone from the public would like to comment. Mr. Kane, were there any comments that came?
There were not.
Thank you. Now I'll open up discussion.
Move to recommend that the city commission approve Z 2001.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Daly,
Aye.
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin. Aye. Commissioner Kostreva,
Aye.
Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman,
Aye.
Commissioner Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is SUP 2009 and SPR 2010. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Our next case is a request for special use permit and site plan review for 910 West Pickard Street. Commissioner Friedrich alluded to the case that was before the Zoning Board of Appeals this past month, which is revolving the same request and same property. Property in question has a CD4 general urban zoning designation with a future land use of industrial. As Commissioner Friedrich indicated, the applicant is proposing to add 2 electric vehicle charging stations to an existing automobile filling station. The property currently has multiple uses on the CD4 portion of the property, including a gas station, automatic car wash, and liquor store. Property owner is Coin LLC. The overall property, which includes several acres that are zoned industrial, is 16.4 acres. Subject property is located on the northeast corner of West Pickard Street and Harris Street. As I mentioned, the property has a split zoning designation, although the entirety of the portion of the property that's used as a gas station, convenience store, liquor store, and automatic car wash is zone CD4. There are several different uses and zoning designations in the immediate vicinity, including single-family residential, multiple tenant industrial, and vacant land that's owned by both the city and the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe. The property is also located on the city boundary, so the properties immediately to the north are located in the Charter Township of Union, and that's reflected in their future land use and zoning designations. This is a view of the subject property looking from West Pickard Street towards the north and east. You'll see in the immediate foreground, there are 4 vehicles parked. In front of those 4 vehicles, you'll see a landscape island. That's the area where the 2 electric vehicle charging stations are proposed to be located. Just outside this image to your right would be West Pickard Street. The image is actually taken from standing on the public sidewalk that runs along West Pickard. The next image will show that same different view perspective of that same landscape island. So again, standing at West Pickard Street, looking into the site towards the northwest, you can sort of make out a couple of concrete pads that are currently located on this property. As Commissioner Friedrich indicated, those at one time did have payphones. It's been, I believe, several years since those were in place. The proposed electric vehicle charging stations would more or less be placed in the same location as those existing concrete pads. Automobile filling stations are subject to a special use permit in the CD4 zoning district, and as such, they're subject to meeting 4 specific special use permit criteria. The application is consistent with 2 of those criteria. A third criteria, which has to do with the servicing of vehicles, does not apply here because no vehicle servicing takes place. And the 4th criteria did receive a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals at their September 23rd, 2020 meeting. On the screen, you'll see an overview of the site plan. Again, overall site, West Pickard Street here, located on the south. The existing canopy for the gasoline fueling stations is shown here, and you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, those fueling stations under that canopy. Behind that canopy is the convenience store for the gas station. To its west is the automatic car wash, and to the east is the landscape island where the 2 electric vehicle charging stations are proposed to be placed. So with that, staff's recommendation is to approve the special use permit and site plan review. We do have multiple folks here on behalf of the application, including, I believe I saw Mike and Dan Coyne or Dave Coyne. I don't have everybody up on my screen anymore, as well as Mr. Beebe from Central Michigan Survey and Development, who I'm sure would be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission might have. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Kane? Seeing none, if the applicant would like to speak.
Good evening. My name's Tim Beebe. I'm with Central Michigan Surveying Development here on behalf of Coyne LLC. What we're looking at is bringing the gas station into the modern age with the electric cars. And the island that was viewed in the pictures and the 2 small concrete pads that were there, you know, as we're seeing things like electric plug-in ports for cars, we also saw telephones go away. So as the site has been there for close to 30 years, it's seen the changes in what the needs of the community and customers are, and they're trying to respond to that. Telephones were no longer needed, they got removed, but charging stations, and especially the rapid charging stations, are something that is needed. You're looking at charging stations that can charge a car to, I believe they told me, 80% within 20 minutes. So it's someplace that travelers can stop and continue on their way. It's a designation that not a lot of the gas stations have, so it is still considered kind of a specialty, but it's something that we're going to be seeing more and more of. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them, or we do have people on that we have the technical person for the power stations themselves.
I get a question of somebody. But what safety issues are there with these? If you can fill, it seems like there's a tremendous amount of electricity or energy being transmitted here. And certainly at some point in time, there's got to be some safety issues, no different than big electric wires, I would assume, right? Am I correct or not correct?
Well, everything that's coming from the transformers to the power stations will be underground. And the power ports for the vehicles are the same power ports that normal plug-in would be. It's just a matter of this is a rapid charge versus the other. If what your concern is the amount of electricity being transferred, there's the plugs are grounded, the pumps, or what I want to continue to call pumps, but they're not pumps, are grounded, and the ports are the standard port that the vehicle would normally hook up to if it was hooked up in your yard in the garage. So safety wise, I think you're looking at as safe as any filling would be. And I'm talking about something that I should probably turn over to the guy that is here that actually knows his plug-in stations. So I think I'm going to shut up and let somebody that knows a little bit more talk.
Is he
Hello,
here?
this is Kyle with Westside Solutions. Yes, to answer your question, they are grounded. They are standard cables. I mean, there's safety requirements from the stations themselves. We don't see issues with that just because of the requirements of, the scenario you're talking about, just the safety side of things. So wouldn't be any issue like that. And it is closer to about roughly say 50% as opposed to the 80% that he mentioned. But yeah,
What voltage are you using, Kyle?
we are 480 volt, 3-phase.
And how many amps do these things carry to charge quickly?
It would be 125 kilowatt output on that.
I would have to back that into amps. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Oh, yeah, just a general question. How is the cost? Certainly, you're going to make some money from this. How is the cost of filling up your electric car going to compare with filling up a gasoline engine? How do you charge per watt? I know we get gas, it's per gallon, but
The state, the utilities in Michigan actually will not allow for the electricity to be sold by the kilowatt from the station. So they're typically billed per minute, and the station host is able to set that rate. Typically, we see about 20 cents a minute up to $1 a minute, depending on the site.
So this is going to take 20 minutes. You fill half your car, it costs you $20.
Again, it's a range. Typically, we see about 20 cents a minute, upwards to $1 a minute, kind of maximum is the most that I've seen set. Typically, I think station hosts are about 20 cents per minute.
Wow.
Any other questions for the applicant? Then I will open up the public hearing. If there's anyone from the public to comment, Mr. Kane?
Well, there is no comment in the comment email. And I don't see anyone raising their hand to participate in the public comment.
Thank you. I will open discussion.
Move to approve SUP 2009 and SPR 2010.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, oh, go ahead,
I
Kathy.
wanted to say that I'm really excited that we're taking the next step on electric vehicles. And thank you for bringing this to our community.
Thank you. Mr. Kane, will you take, oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying I agree with everything Kathy just said.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to say? Okay, Mr. Kane, will you take roll?
I was really anxious to get that roll call vote in. Commissioner Daly,
Aye.
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin,
aye.
Commissioner Kostreva,
Aye.
Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman,
Aye.
Commissioner Eyes.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is TC 2001. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The text change before you tonight is one that we discussed in work session at your August meeting or after your August meeting, and it was introduced at your September meeting. Based upon the feedback that I received from the Planning Commission at that September meeting, the proposed ordinance would change the current land area requirement in the CD4 zoning district, which is 15 units per acre gross max, and make that 35 units per acre gross max. I provide some background on the impact of that change on a square foot basis per unit, which was included in staff's memorandum. After you hold the public hearing, staff is recommending that you recommend to the City Commission adopting text change 2001.
Any questions for Mr. Kane? Okay, then I will open up public comment if there's anyone in the public that would like to comment. Mr. Kane?
Not seeing any hands, and we do not have any messages in the comment email, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And so I'll open up discussion.
So we're going to 30 units or 35 units per acre?
The draft ordinance that was provided to you has 35 units per acre.
I wasn't here for the last meeting. Mr. Kane, gross max, what does that mean?
So that just means that that would be based on the gross land area of the site, and that it's the maximum for the site. So it's just how it's written in every district in terms of district density. It's on a gross land area, so not a net remainder land area. It's based on the overall land area of the parcel, and then this would represent the maximum, not the minimum.
Can you actually get 35 units on an acre if you don't stack them up?
I think you could do townhome style development at that density. One of the examples I provided last month did depict a typical city lot, which is of course not a full acre. That's pretty atypical in the city to have a lot of that size. So this was a more typical residential lot size, and at that 35 units per acre, it results in 3 townhomes, which would have both front and backyard as well as parking for each unit. So it doesn't end up adding to quite the level of density that it might imply. 35 units per acre at 43,000 square feet per acre, you're still talking about, based on the proposed change, about 1,244 square feet of land area per unit. So roughly the size of a typical single family home in the city of Mount Pleasant for land area.
And this is in any residential district? Is that what, do I understand that correctly?
This is in the CD4 zoning district.
Four.
One of our 2 mixed use districts. The CD5 zoning district, which has the same use allowances as the CD4 zoning district, has a gross max land area per unit of 96 units per acre. So quite a bit larger than either the current or proposed in this case.
Thank you.
Any
Move
further?
to recommend that the city commission adopt text change 2001.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Daly,
Aye.
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin,
Aye.
Commissioner Kostreva,
Aye.
Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman,
Aye.
Commissioner Rice.
Nay.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the 2050 master plan. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our final public hearing tonight is the required public hearing on the proposed 2050 master plan. We have been working on this document for a very long time, and a little bit longer than we anticipated because of the impacts of COVID-19. Just to go back, to the very beginning, in March of 2018, the Planning Commission took action to officially commence with a master plan process. That's a required step under the State Planning Enabling Act, is for the Planning Commission to take that action, which triggers us sending a notice of intent to certain other governmental and non-governmental entities to let them know that the city is pursuing a new master plan. Throughout the remainder of 2018, we went through our request for proposals process, which ultimately resulted in McKenna being selected to take us through the public engagement process and create a new master plan for the city. That public engagement and plan drafting primarily happened in the year 2019. It was a really long time ago, back when people could get into a room together without a mask on their face. that we gathered in the City Commission chamber outside different locations around the city and at some of our downtown bars and restaurants to interact with the public back in April of 2019 to get feedback and input on the document that's before you tonight for consideration. Of course, since that initial plan document was first shared with the public back in September of 2019, we've had several presentations on the draft plan. We had hoped in the spring to have open house events in person. Obviously, in light of COVID-19, we had to regroup, and we're fortunate that McKenna was very flexible and able to come up with a unique and engaging way to reach the public and help to let the public learn about the plan with the technology that we have available to us in a way that didn't require face-to-face interaction. And so those events were able to be scheduled for August of this year. We recently ended our extended 63-day review period. So another one of the Planning Enabling Act requirements is that when the draft plan is released for review and comment by the City Commission, those entities that received those notices back in 2018 about our intent to plan receive an additional notice to let them know there's a draft plan for them to review and to provide comments on. We initially released sent those 63-day notices back in February of this year. That was at the time that we expected to have our open houses and would have planned to have this plan before you for consideration at some point over the summer. With the impact of COVID-19, we ended up leaving the plan available for public comment for longer than the 63 days required under the Planning Enabling Act. Ultimately, that comment deadline was extended to September the 18th. We did receive one comment or one response to that request for comments, which was from the Isabel County Planning Commission, and that was included in your packets tonight. We also had the opportunity during this comment period to engage with several members of the public, as well as some of our community partners, such as the Charter Township of Union, Central Michigan University, and the Michigan Department of Transportation to discuss items within the plan that would have jurisdictional overlap. Most recently, the Parks and Recreation Commission held a public hearing on this plan at their September 22nd regular meeting and passed a resolution recommending that the City Commission adopt the plan. Similar to many of our agenda items tonight, ultimate approval authority for master plans in the City of Mount Pleasant resides with the City Commission. So the action requested tonight is for the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Commission adopt the 2050 master plan. We have Paul Lippens on the call with us from McKenna & Associates if there's any questions from the Planning Commission after the public hearing. And I would welcome any questions from the Planning Commission as well. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kane?
Were there any comments that were brought forth by the public?
The majority of the comments in recent months were around mountain biking. Several comments were provided to the Parks Department with regards to there's a local group of mountain bikers. I believe they have a more official formal name than that, and I apologize that it's not coming to me right at the moment. But they have a desire to see mountain biking trails installed in the community, specifically at the Indian Pines Park, which is located, city-owned property located in the Charter Township of Union. As a result of that feedback from those members of the public, an item was added to the Parks book 4 for the Indian Pines section that related that feedback. Other than that, the principal comments we've received, as I indicated, were from our community partners, conversations with the university, Michigan Department of Transportation, and the Charter Township of Union with regard to some of the transportation and land use elements where there's some jurisdictional overlap, primarily to answer questions and ensure that we were on the same page. We did also receive, previously, you've received comments in your packet from the Mount Pleasant Area Convention and Visitors Bureau indicating support of the plan, and from Mike Roberson, who is also on the call tonight, who had indicated support for the M20 realignment, which is included in book 3 of the plan, which deals with transportation.
Any other questions for Mr. Kane? Okay, then I'll open up the public hearing if anyone from the public would like to comment. Mr. Kane?
I don't see any raised hands. If anyone wants to comment, raised hand either on your video or through Zoom. We don't have any messages in our comment inbox. So it appears that we do not have any members that wish to speak.
Thank you. And now I'll open up discussion if anyone has any questions for McKenna.
Yeah, I do have a question. Is it for Paul? Can you hear me?
I can, Commissioner Irwin.
Oh, great. In the final plan as submitted, does it call for an increase or a decrease in the parking in the downtown area?
I don't believe it specifically calls for either. One of the things in the plan, which has been supported by the city, is a revisioning of the town center to include more flexible uses for public gathering and, potentially additional housing. That as part of our, during the public review period, we heard that the city has, invested in that idea. And Jacob, you could elaborate on this. But we did make some changes to the parks plan and the implementation table to acknowledge the support for looking at town center as a more nearer term activity.
Okay, the reason I was asking, and I haven't seen the final updated plan, but at one time, wasn't there a proposal to build a large apartment building on the area where one of the city parking lots is, or was that not in the plan?
That was not in the plan.
That was not in this plan, okay.
No.
The only other question I would have is if the state of Michigan does not rebuild Mission Street, I mean, isn't that kind of the heart of the plan as submitted? And if that doesn't happen, doesn't that kind of mean the plan is not that useful? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can jump in there, Paul. The Mission Street sub-area plan is obviously an important part of this master plan. I don't think we have a city master plan going back to 1965 that doesn't have a significant emphasis on the Mission Street corridor. Having said that, though, the bulk of this master plan does not involve Mission Street, and in fact, even the transportation plan that's in Book 3, while it has a significant amount of information about Mission Street and a potential concept for reimagining that corridor, it goes into great detail about the remainder of the transportation network. And I think the good thing about the plan specific for Mission Street and in general for citywide is that even if that Mission Street vision weren't to be implemented in one project, if it was an incremental implementation, or if ultimately analysis of that vision showed that certain components of the vision perhaps won't make sense as applied, or maybe don't make sense in every instance along the corridor. So just as an example, maybe it makes sense on certain parts of the corridor to have some additional median space, but perhaps on other areas of the corridor, it won't make sense. And maybe that's a short-term concession, or maybe in the long term, it doesn't make sense. That plan really is designed in a way where those components are flexible. And so I don't think elimination of the components from parts of the plan or from the entirety of the plan will cause the rest of the plan to fail. The reason why we were excited about this plan coming out of the April engagement events is that it had support from both Michigan Department of Transportation and Central Michigan University as a concept they were willing to explore further. We weren't looking for a formal endorsement from either party. We were just looking for openness to continue that dialogue. And I think there's a lot of great elements in that plan that will be part of that conversation as we continue to work with MDOT. As you said, though, funding is going to be crucial to the realization of anything in this master plan. And certainly with regard to Mission Street, we'll be looking to work with our MDOT partners on their programming, out into the next 5 and 10 years to see if there will be opportunities for them to secure funding from the state in order to make our project or multiple smaller projects possible along that corridor.
Jacob, or anyone. It seemed to me that, well, I don't exactly know what's supposed to happen on University Avenue other than a gazebo with a something in the middle of it at University in Michigan.
Sure. So the section that deals with University Avenue is really focused on the fact that that corridor presents a unique opportunity to provide a visual connection between the downtown and University. So when you're positioned in our downtown and you look to the south, you can make out the Central Michigan University seal that's located at the base of University Avenue at Bellows Street. And depending on the time of year, you can also slightly make out Warner Hall. The University Master Plan calls for some activities to occur in that area on the south end of that corridor that would enhance the view perspective so that folks to the north of Warner Hall were better able to see it. And what this plan does is it looks at, on the northern end of that corridor, is there something we could do as a city to enhance the visual perspective from the south, so that if you're a student or a faculty member and you're at the south end of campus, it provides a visually appealing indicator to let you know that there's something down the corridor that's worth visiting, and provides sort of a terminus. This is a kind of getting into the weeds on an urban design principle, but there's a notion that having something at the end of your sight line, it makes a distance feel shorter, and it provides an opportunity and invites people to come and find out what that is. The gazebo element that's shown in the master plan is really just a placeholder. The master plan is not endorsing that as a design. It's really just the concept of having something that would have some visual impact there. That's a very important corridor historically, and it remains an important corridor. We've got a number of institutions that are located along that corridor still, most notably the Chippewa River District Library, the Veterans Library Building. I know with Corey on this call, we're all going to agree that the library is extremely important in Mount Pleasant. And the proposal would actually be at that intersection of University and Illinois Street. So 2 blocks to the south of Broadway, not at Michigan Street. Again, it's just an opportunity to create some sort of focal point along the corridor at the north end that would balance and mirror the focal points at the south end of the corridor that already exist.
Does it then sort of mess up Sacred Heart's general traffic flow in any way?
There shouldn't be anything about that, a proposed design there that would have an adverse impact on traffic flow. Certainly anything that was implemented would be implemented in a way that was respectful of not just the Sacred Heart traffic flow, but the traffic flow in and out of downtown into the library, all of which are major traffic generators in that immediate vicinity. Again, it's really just at this point, the concept included in the plan is not a final design or a artistic rendering of the final product. It's just a illustration of the conceptual idea, which is that by placing something as a focal point in that general vicinity, you can create a mirroring of the Warner Hall and encourage folks to utilize that corridor and better connect Central Michigan University and the neighborhood into our downtown.
Thank you.
I have a different question. There is a map that is in the master plan. Does that then become the new zoning map? Does it get adopted like kind of universally or section by section? I mean, do we need to hash out details on that map?
So that's a good question. So there are 2 principal maps included in the master plan. There's a future transportation map and a future land use map. Future land use map is one of the statutory requirements for a master plan to adopt a future land use map. And our current 2014 master plan does include a future land use map. I referenced that in the presentation earlier tonight regarding the rezoning request on South Fancher Street. Future land use maps are meant to be generalized maps where as a zoning map is meant to be specific to individual properties. A future land use map is just as it's described. It's meant to depict desired future conditions. It does not, it would not result in a immediate effect upon adoption of the plan. So the future land use map in and of itself is a reference document. It's something for the Planning Commission and City Commission to utilize moving forward when they're considering rezoning requests or considering proactive rezonings on behalf of the city. Ultimately, any of those requests would still be subject to the criteria of rezoning that exists in the zoning ordinance, and they're ultimately legislative decisions. Consistency of those decisions with the future land use map is a good practice to have as a community, but it's not required. And so that's really what that map is meant to do, is just to depict future conditions. It's not regulatory. It doesn't have the regulatory effect of a zoning map. And our zoning map as it exists today would continue to exist regardless of the outcome of the master plan adoption.
So the answer to the question was no, this is not a new zoning map.
I'm sorry, did you want the short answer?
Didn't want to.
No, it is not. It is not a zoning map. It is understandably. It's a good question to ask because it's a map of parcels with colors on it and a legend that indicates land use. So it could be easily misconstrued as a zoning map for folks who weren't aware of the purpose of a future land use map. But that is the purpose of the future land use map, is just as a vision document that would help guide policy making in the future.
Jacob, I like the planner's answer, so I'm glad you gave the long answer on that one.
Thank you, Paul.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, sorry. By putting entrance and exits on for 27 on Broomfield, is the idea then that you reduce a lot of just fast through traffic on Mission?
Yeah, there's a number of potential benefits to an interchange at that location. I think one important one is the ability to channel some of the industrial traffic, some of the truck traffic that might be entering our industrial park south, giving it an alternative route that doesn't rely on the business route, 127 Mission Street or Isabella Road. A secondary impact would be for folks who are traveling to the south from the university. It would provide another alternative to take some of the through traffic impact on Mission Street and remove that, so that folks who are local traffic, folks who are headed to a local destination, that capacity is reserved for that local traffic. From both a safety perspective and a traffic flow perspective, that could have some positive benefits over the short and long terms. And so that's really why that's been included. We've also received some public comment during the master plan process indicating that there was interest in exploring that as an additional means of entrance and exit of the community. Right now, as you all know, if you are on the south end of town and you're headed north, you have to travel all the way to either Pickard and 127 or all the way up the Mission Street corridor to exit the community. This would also provide another opportunity for folks headed north to access the expressway without putting those long distance trips on our local streets.
Any other comments or motion?
I'd like to make a positive comment, but should I do it before the motion or after the motion?
You can do it now or after.
So I just want to say that it's good plan. There was phenomenal input. We did real well with our last master plan, and we need a direction to go into the future. And I think this it's exciting. It's just an exciting plan.
I will move to approve the attached resolution recommending that the City Commission adopt the 2050 master plan.
And I will second it, Christine.
Any more discussion?
I would just like to echo what Commissioner Horgan said, and since this will probably be my last opportunity to do so, just wanted to thank Paul Lippens and his team at McKenna for working with us through this process. I don't think when we started communicating back in 2018 that we ever imagined that we would be considering adoption via Zoom, nor that we would have our engagement events canceled this year. I think we are lucky, having talked with some other planners around the state who are tackling their master plans this year. We're fortunate that we seized the day when we did and didn't delay until this year. So we were able to still have our face-to-face charrette process. I'll just want to say, there's, as Commissioner Horgan mentioned, our current master plan has served us well. Every year, I have the opportunity through our annual report to give you an update on our implementation of that plan. And we've made great progress with that implementation. I would expect that the entirety of this 2050 master plan is not going to see implementation as presented. That's would be highly unusual. This plan is a roadmap. Conditions are going to continue to change. The public's going to continue to be involved in the implementation of the plan moving forward. And that's really going to be critical to the success of the plan, is the public's continued participation, as well as the participation of folks like you on our boards and commissions. And so this is the beginning, not the end of a process. And there's a lot of exciting opportunities within this master plan. And so I look forward to working with all of you on the implementation over the next several years.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Daly?
Aye.
Commissioner Friedrich?
Aye.
Commissioner Honig?
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan?
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin?
Nay.
Commissioner Kostreva?
Aye.
Commissioner Leash?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman?
Aye.
Commissioner Rise?
Nay.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Lippens?
I just said thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lippens. Anyways, next item on the agenda is public comment. This is the public's last opportunity today to make a comment if they would like. Mr. Kane, is there anyone from the public?
It looks like Mr. Batchelor has his hand raised.
Hello, I'm Jim Batchelor. I live at 619 South Fancher. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. I intended to comment earlier, and to the extent that it's appropriate to do so now, I just wanted to say, as the owner of the property immediately to the north of the 623 South Fancher property, I'm enthusiastically in favor of the action that you've already undertaken tonight, and will say the same to the City Commission. The several congregations that have owned that church over the last 15 years that I've lived here have been great neighbors when they've been around. I'm very much looking forward to having a neighbor who might at least share in getting the leaves off that property and the snow off the sidewalk every year. So thanks for your good work.
Thank you. And I believe I saw Mr. Beebe raise his hand.
Am I muted or unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Unmuted. Okay. I just had one question, and it was basically for Jacob in regards to the charging stations. Is there any timeline that has to be waited before they can start pursuing that?
No, there's no conditions associated with the approval, so that project could have started 15, 20 minutes ago.
Geez, I wasted all this time.
Well, we'll take this as your goodbye then.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. You'll have your approval letter in the morning.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is discuss amendments to table 154-405A of the zoning ordinance and consider setting a public hearing on this issue at the November 5th, 2020 regular meeting. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The ordinance before you for consideration is the same one that was presented to you in work session last month. As I indicated then, this is the result of ongoing communication between city staff and the Home Builders Association of Central Michigan. Very pleased that we were able to find common ground on concerns that they had with the standards for residential buildings in those districts. And tonight, just looking for the Planning Commission to take action to set that public hearing for November 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Any questions for Mr. Kane? Okay, I'll open up discussion.
Move to set a public hearing on text change 2002, November 5th, 2020 regular meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I did have just a comment on the proposed ordinance for, let's just start with the first one where it says proposed 30-foot minimum, 50-foot max may be lesser or greater to no more than the average of existing adjacent setbacks sharing the same frontage. I totally agree with this. However, I think there could be a bit of an interpretation to be the opposite of less restrictive and making it more restrictive because of the ors and the doubles of lesser or greater or and two more, no more. So I think there might be just a little bit more clarification in that language, that we're not trying to make it more restrictive, but that it could be in the case that the adjacent setbacks sharing the same frontage are lesser or greater, there could be an exception. That's all I wanted to say. And there's a couple of them like that.
I guess I don't understand what would make or more restrictive. It generally has the opposite effect of being more restrictive, as it doesn't make everything required.
An interpreter could say, well, it's or greater than the average of existing, or no more.
Well, it says maybe lesser or greater to no more than the average of existing adjacent setbacks. How do you interpret that to mean greater than? Or, I mean, it's to be as flexible as possible. That's how I see that language. If you use and, then it's very restrictive.
I mean, as applied, the language is intended to allow, as an example, if you had two developed lots with a undeveloped lot in between them, and it was located in the CD3L zoning district that's in section 1, and let's imagine that those homes on either side were currently set back 25 feet from the front property line. This would allow for that new build that's located on the vacant lot in between those to be built. The base zoning requirement would be between 30 and 50 feet, but they would have the additional flexibility to be built as close as 25 feet, which is the average of the two adjacent properties. On the flip side, if the properties on either side, let's say one was located 100 feet back and one was located 50 feet back, that property, the base zoning would be 30 to 50, but there would be an allowance to be as far back as 75 feet, which would be the average of those two setbacks.
You're muted, Kathy.
If the average were 75 feet and you wanted to build it at 30, we want to let them build it at 30.
They can build it at 30.
Right. But somebody could say, or no, maybe lesser, they can't build it because it's less. It's just my thought. As long as it's interpreted correctly, it's great, but it could be misinterpreted.
If the average is 75 feet and you want to build it at 30 feet, that's allowed. If you wanted to build it at 25 feet, and the average was 75 feet, nothing in this language would permit it to be 25 feet.
I think the difference here is this isn't a shall statement, it's a may statement. So generally speaking, that's just introducing flexibility. It's not implementing a requirement on anyone. So the requirement is 30 feet min, 50 feet max, and it does offer the flexibility for that setback to adjust based on adjacent averages. So it's not requiring anyone to use those adjacent averages. It's just offering that additional flexibility. Whereas our current code as written would just say include the 30-foot minimum, 50-foot max. That is the current standard in that district. This is granting that additional flexibility if existing conditions of adjacent properties are different than that standard.
Jacob, is it common language to express it that way?
I mean, to the extent that zoning is common language, I mean, I'm so far in the zoning world that I'm not sure I know what common language looks like anymore. But from a zoning perspective, this is common zoning language.
That's what I'm asking. And you'd be working with your planner and.
Yeah, I believe this is clear. We certainly gave this a tremendous amount of thought to make sure that this was as unambiguous as possible. And it was reflective of the feedback we received, which was looking for specifically that flexibility. And so, I mean, I don't think that code language is very rarely completely unambiguous unless it's a table with, you know, a permitted but even within that, folks will say, well, what's a retail store or what's a gas station? So there's always some ambiguity, but I believe it's straightforward or I wouldn't have presented it. I'm not sure that off the top of my head, I can come up with a more clear way to state it. But I believe it's clear as presented.
And our city attorney drafted the ordinance?
No, staff drafted the ordinance.
Okay.
I've seen language like this before in other states. We're looking at shoreline zoning and you have like, think of another state where it's 75 feet back. Somebody's 100, but they have similar language about maybe lesser or greater as what they call grandfathering in houses into a surrounding context that was pre-existing. So I think this is perfectly fine as written, and I'm happy to vote with anyone else's.
I'm happy to, as would be common practice, have the attorney review the ordinance draft before it comes forward for public hearing. We typically wouldn't have it reviewed at this introduction stage unless it was, you know, something. I hate to say something complicated because clearly this is a fairly complicated ordinance, but really when you break it down into subcomponents, it's each one individually is fairly straightforward. But it would be our practice to have the attorney review it. And certainly I will share that concern that you raised, Commissioner Rice, and ask him to pay attention to that. And if he has any recommendations on that, I will include them in the version that comes forward next month.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? We already have a motion, right? Or did we have a motion?
We do have a motion already.
Okay. Mr. Kane, will you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Daly,
Sorry. Aye.
Commissioner Friedrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Honig,
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin,
Aye.
Commissioner Kostreva,
Aye.
Commissioner Leash,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman,
Aye.
Commissioner Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is staff report. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are likely going to have a very busy meeting next month. In addition to the public hearing that you just set, we will aim expecting that we will have between 3 and 5 special use permit applications related to adult use marijuana. As you all know, we had our selection process for recreational marijuana retailers concluded back in August. And per the timelines established in the regulatory ordinance, those applicants have already filed their special use permit applications for the 3 retailers. And we also have 2 medical and, one medical marijuana and 1 recreational marijuana grower application for special use permit that are also pending that we're expecting will be on that November agenda. So it will be very packed agenda, but all likely more or less on the same topic. I also wanted to let you all know, remind you that the Michigan Association of Planning Conference is being held next week, October 7th, 8th, and 9th. You'll be shocked to learn that it's a virtual conference. You know, for all of you, it will be great. For me, it means that I don't get to go somewhere fun. So I'm a little bummed, not gonna lie. But it's a great opportunity if you've ever wanted to participate in the MAP conference, but your schedule didn't allow it. This would be a great year to take advantage of that virtual opportunity. Of course, the city's training budget, we would be happy to accommodate your participation in that. Even if you're just thinking you might be able to dip into a session or 2, I'd be happy to talk to you about that participation. So please let me know if you're interested. Finally, I just wanted to share the documents that were included in your packet tonight related to the redevelopment ready sites. I wanted to share these with you just because it's exciting. It was one of the perks that we obtained as a community as a result of our redevelopment ready community certification. The Planning Commission played a pretty significant role in the steps that were necessary to obtain that certification. And so we're beginning to see some fruits of that labor in the form of those 2 redevelopment packages. I'll keep you posted if we see, hopefully, some action as a result of those documents. But just wanted you to know that they were there and that we're excited about them. We had our developer showcase event for 200 East Broadway Street yesterday. And so that RFQ process for a prospective developer for that site is ongoing. We expect proposals to come in by November the 12th. And hopefully by the end of the calendar year, if that process is successful, working with Isabel Bank, we may have a developer lined up for that project. So that's what I have for you tonight. I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll turn things back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kane? Okay, seeing no questions, if someone would like to move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Do you need a roll call vote to adjourn?
I think so. Why not? Just one more to close out the night. I'll do it as fast as I can.
Okay.
Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
Commissioner Friedrich.
Aye.
Commissioner Honig.
Aye.
Commissioner Horgan.
Aye.
Commissioner Irwin.
Aye.
Commissioner Kostreva.
Aye.
Commissioner Leash.
Aye.
Commissioner Ortman.
Aye.
Commissioner Rice.
Aye. But I still wanted to just say nay, just to.
Hey, Kathy, stay on the call. We can hang out. I got all night.
Meeting adjourned.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Night.